Good morning and most welcome to 1311 of the series. Today we will talk about the body and its movements, and I've given a subtitle to this principal title, What is Abstract Thinking? And it's a sort of an explanation. Since thinking is movement, only bodily movement can be development. We know today from the science of cognition that all higher thinking is done through the motor cortex, the movement center in the brain and body. So the principal title is, What is abstract thinking? We have different criteria, and one trait is definitely doing without or little movement, that the movement is not so explicit. It is less physical, so to speak, not as crude. The second is combinatory proficiency, that is ability to combine different concepts into new one or subtract concepts from one another. And then a little borrow from Barbara Twersky. It is decontextualization and recontextualization. The ability to take something out of its context and put it into another. All this is done by the movement as shown by Barbara Twersky, but also modern science of cognition, where we have names, for instance, like David Bader and Chimero. The last one I put up here, there are of course loads more. It is that sort of thinking is higher. It's elevated understanding, encompassing. That means it covers more than compared to crude movement. It is not as limited. It is exactly what we mean by intellectual thinking. It is an abstraction that takes the cruder bodily movement, the coarse ones. You can think of a Neanderthal man with his axe cutting things down, and that there is a progressive refinement of the movements as civilization develops, and the social interactions, laws, rules, cooperation becomes, as civilization grows, becomes more and more complex, but also in some cases more simplified. That is the elevated. This is also a point to that thinking is in different levels. It is not just one straight line. It's a developmental feature. And this is why I wanted to have the developmental aspect into the subtitle. It's very important to understand this is something that develops in history. It is from history. It is in connection with human interaction with others, with the environment, and the knowledge they already produced. So it's similar in many aspects to the two cosmological fallacies. The one side that we were stuck in, the idea that the laws do not develop in history nor in time, and that there is a definite start, makes understanding equal level, so to speak, and that there is a final understanding. The final understanding in physics is the theory of everything, for instance, just to give you a sort of hint, a favorite of the late Stephen Hawking, among others, of course Steven Weinberg. But that's an equal level of knowledge. And this knowledge, since it doesn't have steps, takes away the observer. Can you see the finesse? If the observer is in knowledge, there has to be different levels of understanding, since we are differently developed, something that we know from neurology and science of cognition. And I would say that is something that we know directly as human beings. We are not all the same. And that is also the idea with learning, to get a completely different understanding and more sophisticated, but not only to the details, but an understanding that is more rewarding, more functional, working better in the world. You don't have that with the theory of everything. It's an end station, and it's a bit like knowledge is thereby finished at that year, and it can be stored in a storehouse and forgotten about. This is absolutely passive knowledge. Whereas this is active, for there's an observer, there is a thinking or moving mind. So today the special subject will be the body itself, the center of intellectual life and the developmental faculty. And I will start easy, not too complicated, by some things that might astonish you. This is an article about body language with some new understanding, and they are actually depicted a lot by a famous researcher called Amy Cuddy. And the article in itself is called Body Language. It's starts like this. Body language is older and more innate for us humans than even language or facial expressions. That's why people born blind can perform the same body language expressions as people who can see. They come pre-programmed with our brains. I've always been incredibly fascinated with body language and how it helps us achieve our goals in life. The power of body language is probably best described by Amy Cuddy's famous quote, "Our non-verbals govern how other people think and feel about us." If you are anything like me, then you have had a healthy obsession with body language for some time. In recent years, a fascinating studies at Harvard, Princeton, and other top universities shed new light on body language and how to use it at work. So whilst the power of language is extremely important to convey the right message, the power of body language, however, might be the determining factor of how someone makes us feel. Here's an insight into some of the latest studies on how we can use body language to our advantage in everyday life. Your body expresses emotion better than your face. We all grew up learning how to deal with each other based on facial expressions. And yet, that might not at all be the best way to judge other people's emotions. Researchers from Princeton performed a very simple experiment. They asked study participants to judge from photography whether that person is feeling joy, loss, victory, or pain. Now, some photographs showed facial expressions only. Some showed body language, and some both. have a go yourself at the following picture and try to say whether the tennis player's faces on the right enjoy victory or loss. There is a depiction here, and I can say obviously the face does not tell what it is about. Yes, and the results could not be more startling. In 4 separate experiments, participants more accurately guessed the pictured emotion based on body language, alone or combined with facial expressions, than on facial context alone. Extremely positive and extremely negative emotions are especially hard to distinguish from each other, explains head researcher Todorov. Now it gets even more interesting. Body language isn't just something we have to learn. Most emotional expressions can be built into our system. For example, scientists from British Columbia observed congenitally blind people at the Paralympics. In this example, you can see the left athlete. She is of vision, whereas the right athlete is congenitally blind, yet after winning, both express the same language for victory. I have to show this to Ken as well. So they are both contestants in a judo tournament. She is seeing and he's born blind, congenitally blind. And as you can see, their bodily expressions are more or less identical. And he has never ever seen another human being. So body language is both ancient and ingrained, and also so powerful to express our true emotions. How can we use it better in our everyday lives to achieve what we want? Amy Cuddy from Harvard has answers for us. Body language changes who you are, literally. In one of my favorite TED Talks, Amy Cuddy explains some of the most peculiar happenings of body language. Cuddy focuses a lot on the business world and how body language is helpful for us here, and the possibilities seem to have no boundaries. Cuddy distinguishes between two different types of body postures. One are powerful poses, and their counterpart are powerless one. Here is an example of powerful and low power poses. And in the depiction, you can see people either showing up a widening body posture or a contracting one. Widening, going out in all directions, making one taller and wider, larger, literally. And the other one is contracting, making oneself smaller. And this is always observed in different positions in the hierarchy. Now Cuddy's research reveals a bunch of extremely interesting things. The first is that the expressing more powerful poses helps us get better jobs. Makes us feel better and makes us overall more successful. And yet it goes a lot further than to just change the positioning of your legs or arms. Cuddy explains that inside our bodies, actual changes are happening as our body changes. These changes largely have to do with hormones. The two hormones in question are testosterone, which is the power hormone, which amongst a lot of other things helps us to be a better leader, have more focus and attention. Cortisol, the stress hormone, which amongst lots of other things makes us less reactive to stress, makes us feel overwhelmed and powerless. Here is what Cuddy's experiment contained. They brought people into a room. For 2 minutes, they would either perform a powerful pose or a powerless pose. Then they would go on into performing a job interview. The results were absolutely stunning. Neutral recruiters who did not know who performed which pose consistently picked only those that previously performed the powerful poses as people they would want to hire. On top of that, the actual hormone levels of people changed dramatically. Here's the increase in testosterone and the drop in cortisol after performing the power pose for just 2 minutes. And here are the hormone levels after performing the powerless pose, with a significant drop in testosterone and increase in cortisol. According to Cuddy, her findings show that changing our body language doesn't just change our outcomes. It changes who we are as people. So instead of faking until you make it, her advice is fake it until you become it. Can you fake it until you make it? Yes. Here are 5 postures to work on today to answer the question, how can I improve my body language? One, focus on the position of your feet. Kinsey Goman has researched the importance of body language in the workplace for many years. One of her best tips is to watch your feet. A lot of time we focus on our upper body or faces. Yet our feet reveal more about our emotions than we might think. When you approach 2 people talking, you will be acknowledged in one of 2 ways. If the feet of your two colleagues stay in place and they twist only their upper torsos in your direction, they don't really want you to join the conversation. But if their feet open to include you, then you know that you are truly invited to participate. In another example from her book, Goman explains when to know that conversations are over. Whenever you are speaking with a co-worker who seems to be paying attention and whose upper body is angled toward you, but whose legs and feet have turned toward the door, realize that the conversation is over. Her feet are telling you she wants to leave. Foot positions are revealing, even if someone's legs are crossed. Smile. This is the second one. Smile, it'll make you happier. We smile because we are happy. But does it work the other way around too? Researchers at Cardiff University think so. People who smile without actually feeling happy can make themselves feel a lot happier, says Michael Lewis, a co-author of the study. It would appear that the way we feel emotions isn't just restricted to our brains. There are parts of our bodies that help and reinforce the feelings we are having. Of course, being able to smile well is a whole other story. For now, give it a try to smile in the restroom or in another quiet place before a difficult conversation, job interview or meeting. It might just make you more successful. And I was thinking about myself here. I am looking forward to a day without eating, and I realize I found it hard to smile. But point taken from Amy Cudder, I will try to smile even on fasting days. 3. Practice Amy Cuddy's power poses before important meetings. Amy Cuddy suggests 3 distinct power poses to practice for 2-3 minutes before you have an important conversation. Try them next time in a quiet place and see if they have the same results for you. Four, realign your body more congenially with your conversation partner. Another great tip from Goman mentions that if you try to align yourself more congenially with a conversation partner, you will be able to solve tension in conversations and come to solutions more quickly. If you physically align yourself with that person, sitting or standing shoulder to shoulder, facing the same direction, you will diffuse the situation. I found this especially true with meeting people you've never met before. It's hard to build rapport at the start. Focusing on aligning can make a big difference. Give it a try. 5. Lower your voice with deep breathing. Although not a specific tip for body posture, this is one of my favorite tips. Men and women with deeper voices are more likely to land in leadership positions and are generally perceived as a greater authority. To lower your voice, especially before an interview, try to take some deep belly breaths. Which generally contracts and raises the pitch of your voice. What other body language insights have you come across? That's the end of the article. I will put some real demonstrations at the end of this lecture, starting with the depiction. And more about that later. Now we will go to a bit more complicated article. It's posture and social problem solving, self-esteem and optimism by Sarah K. Nielsen. A link to both texts will be in the description of the video. I will start with the abstract. When feeling powerful, humans and other animals display expansive postures, but can posing in expansive and powerful postures also generate empowerment, and found conflicting evidence. Some evidence of power posing's impact shows increased hormones and, and a variety of behaviors indicating greater confidence. Yet still others have found no effect on hormones or behaviors. And suggest the impact of power posing is overstated. The goal of this project was to replicate and extend previous knowledge and contribute to the debate as to the efficacy of power posing, specifically examining the impact on participants' self-report, social problem-solving efficacy, self-esteem and optimism. 119 participants were randomly assigned to one of three conditions: high power pose, low power pose, self, and a control group with a puzzle solving task, and asked to complete self-report measures of optimism, self-esteem and problem-solving efficacy. Current findings suggest expansive posture demonstrates no measurable impact on excuse me, on psychological attitudes and contributes to recent literature contradicting the power-posing effect. Research and practical implications are discussed. Keywords in the article are posture, power pose, problem solving, self-esteem, optimism, embodied cognition. Introduction. The study of physical postures has enjoyed a long history. In one of the first studies of posture display, Riskind and Gauthier found motivational and emotional impact on both the self and others across a series of 4 studies. Participants seated in slumped positions more readily developed helplessness and were more likely to be perceived as depressed by observers than participants seated in an upright position. The link between posture and assumed dominance was solidified in 2005 when researchers established specific behaviors associated with dominance and power. Non-verbal behaviors identified with actual associations to power and dominance included more facial expressiveness, more bodily openness, smaller interpersonal distances, relaxed sounding voices, and greater verbal expressions. In more recent time, researchers began to turn the investigation of posture inward to the actor and the socio-emotional and cognitive impact. Harmon Jones and Peterson, 2009, explored how bodily posture impacts emotional judgment by tracking neural cortical activity as compared to subjects in reclined positions. Schubert and Cole found participants reported increased feelings of empowerment after holding a fist, considered a dominant posture. Social science research has found that the act of smiling both produces and reflects positive moods, known as the facial feedback hypothesis. Similarly, a growing number of studies have investigated the relationship between expansive non-verbal behaviors and indications of power or powerlessness, suggesting that expansive physical expression both reflects and also produces power. Research has found that holding dominant or expansive postures increases subjects' feeling of power, confidence, pain, tolerance, self-esteem, and lowers fear. In fact, posing powerfully is reported to have a greater impact on subjects' action orientation and, listen now, thought abstraction than by actually occupying a powerful role. Unfortunately, expansive posturing increases the more negative side of power as well, such as subjects' dishonesty, risk tolerance, cheating, and traffic violations. In addition to many behavioral and attitudinal effects of expansive posturing, there is evidence linking it to hormonal and neuroendocrine changes. In particular, dominant poses increases salivary and blood serum levels of testosterone, which is a hormone linked to dominance and status seeking. While lowering levels of cortisol, a hormone linked to stress and low social status. Together, this hormonal combination suggests power posing leaves the subject feeling dominant and powerful, while also less stressed. Less stressed. Do note. A potent hormonal interaction, greater testosterone and lower cortisol, has been linked to hierarchical position and status for business executives, suggesting greater leadership potential. An interesting outcome of greater empowerment is the potential impact it may have on a subject in evaluating social situations such as job interviews, work evaluations, etc. Research has found executive functioning increases with expansive posturing, such as greater cognitive processing and goal-oriented behaviors. The cognitive processing gains of empowerment combined with the psychological and hormonal changes, including increased testosterone, lowered cortisol, and greater confidence and self-esteem. For instance, have potential to greatly improve performance. Participants who were primed to think of powerful moments in their lives before applying for admission to business schools were judged to be more persuasive and chosen for admission than those who were not primed. Indeed, research has found that subjects engaged in power posing prior to job interviews were more frequently chosen for hire. And now to the interesting metacognition. Researchers have begun to unpack the mechanisms through which confidence and positive attitudes are facilitated with expansive posture. According to self-validation perspective, metacognition has a strong impact on persuasiveness of thought. In our attention. Interestingly, researchers found that posture increased thought confidence, such that it either magnified or attenuated the effect of any thoughts participants were considering. For example, Bristol and Petty found that when participants generated positive thoughts toward a proposal while in the expansive posture, their positive thoughts were more confident and more positive than those generated while in constricted posture. Likewise, negative thoughts generated while in expansive posture were more negative than those generated in constricted posture due to the increased confidence in their thoughts. The self-validation effect is not limited to attitude toward others. In fact, has been found to influence self-validation. Expansive body posture magnified the direction of thoughts, whether positive or negative. On self-related attitudes, while constricted posture attenuated the effect. I think the name you should remember here is Brignol. His surname is spelled with a tilde. And it shows that the strength of the thoughts are diminishing when we constrict our posture. Brignol is a very frequent name in these areas. Thank you. Thinking is very different from person to person, and the idea of just looking at the content is the problematic thing about all. We should look at content and form. And do make a comparison with body and mind. By neglecting the mind, we lose our capability to abstract thinking. The mind needs to come back, and that can only be done via the body. The body is the source of abstractedness. So we lose out in both ends. It is never ever one-sided. because they reflect each other, just like a coin has two sides necessary for its existence. Let's take a short pause here. Ooh. So we continue. Expansive body posture magnify the direction of thoughts on self-related attitudes. While constricted posture attenuated the effect. By impacting the confidence with which people held their thoughts, Brignol and Petty showed that there was a significant, almost staggering difference in the force of thought. This is the fractality and complexity level of thought, where the showing the possible impact of the thinking and the truthfulness of the thinking. This self-validation impacted the extent to which participants relied on their thoughts. When forming self-attitudes and judging their promise as a potential job candidate, when in a confident pose, participants relied on the thoughts when forming self-attitudes. But not when they held doubtful postures. Body posture has been directly linked to a variety of important cognitive processes, specifically the metacognitive process of thought confidence. Confirmatory processing and action orientation. It has also been associated with several behavior indicators, such as puzzle solving, persistence, job interview performance, and non-verbal presence. Research has yet to examine, however, a specific link between expansive posture and problem solving through thought confidence. The present study seeks to examine potential gains on problem-solving skill as well as problem-solving efficacy. A measure of problem-solving confidence from thought confidence through expansive posture. Expansive posturing will predict higher ratings of A, social problem solving efficacy, and B, skill. Emotions and attitudes. The study of muscular changes and emotion is as old as the study of psychology itself, and began with William James. Since that time, most research has focused on the facial feedback hypothesis. Until recently, with a greater focus on embodied cognition. Posture itself has been linked to negative emotion and specifically identified as a feature of depression. Michalek and Bem suggests self-observation and attribution may be to blame, such that if we are hunched over, we infer that we are sad, etc. More recent examinations of this link have found greater positivity, more arousal, better mood, and less fear after holding expansive posture. The present study seeks to further examine the link between posture and positive emotions, and hypothesizes the following. Expansive posturing will predict higher ratings of optimism and B, self-esteem. Contribution to literature. While previous research provides support for the impact of embodied cognition on a myriad of biopsychosocial outcomes, such as hormonal changes, cognitive processing gains, and selection outcomes. recent evidence suggests the claims of power posing benefits may be overstated. In their recent conceptual replication of the well-known Carney, Cuddy, and Yap study, Rainhill et al. Found that while expansive posture impacted participants, self-reported feelings of power did not impact participants' behavior or hormonal levels. Their findings suggests that the impact of power posing might be quite limited, or at the least subject to moderation by very specific conditions, such as gender, awareness of the hypothesis of the experiment, or the cover story variable. Timing of the posture and the experimenter's blindness to the experiment. In their rebuttal, Carney, Cuddy, and Yap discussed evidence of expansive posture and power posing research across 33 studies, and suggested Rainhill et al.'s results are due to methodological differences. However, that summary did not include quantitative analysis across findings. Simmons and Simonson examined the research previously summarized in Carney et al. Using P-curve analysis and found no evidence of an effect after accounting for selective reporting. Research on the power posing effect and the impact of expansive posture on both attitudes and behavior is clearly mixed. The current study proposes to investigate possible links between expansive posturing, cognitive processing, and attitudes, and will contribute to a resolution of the debate in the literature regarding future directions for embodied cognition research. Procedures. This study utilized an experimental design. Participants were voluntarily recruited and told the purpose of the study was to investigate the relationship between non-verbal behavior and attitudes. After participants provided their informed consent, they were randomly assigned to one of these three groups. Either one, the expansive high power pose, two, the constricted low power pose, or three, a control group with a puzzle activity. They were asked to hold the pose or work the puzzle for 2 minutes while the experimenter left the room. After 2 minutes, the participants were asked to provide their self-evaluations using an online survey. Previous research has established some postures and poses are perceived as more powerful than others. The high power poses involve expansive bodily position, with open limbs, while low power poses involve contractive positions with closed limbs. Project participants were instructed and lightly directed by hand. When necessary, to hold either a low or high power pose. Measures. After participants held the high, low power pose or worked the puzzle for 2 minutes, they were asked to complete a series of online surveys measuring optimism, self-esteem, and problem-solving confidence. Optimism was measured using the 10-item revised life orientation. Respondents are asked to indicate the extent of their agreement with each of the items using a 5-point scale from 1, strongly disagree, to 5, strongly agree. 4 of the items are filler items and are not included in scoring. of the remaining 6 items, 3 are worded positively and 3 are negatively worded and are reverse coded before scoring, such that responses are summed to create an overall optimism score. The range of possible scores include 5 to 30, and the mean score of participants in this study was 22, with a SD of 2.9. Sample items from this scale include: in uncertain times, I usually expect the best, and if something can go wrong for me, it will. Self-esteem was measured using Rosenberg's self-esteem scale. The scale has 10 items, with 5 each worded positively or negatively. Negatively worded items are reverse coded before scoring, such that responses are summed to create an overall self-esteem score. The range of possible scores include 10 to 15. The mean score of participants in this study was 38, with a SD of 4.5. Sample items from this scale include: on the whole, I am satisfied with myself, and at times I think I am no good at all. Problem-solving confidence was measured using the problem-solving inventory. This measure includes 2 subscales: the problem-solving self-efficacy measure, which specifically measures one's efficacy or confidence regarding one's ability to solve problems, and 2, the problem-solving skill measure, the PSS, which assesses one's constructive and dysfunctional problem-solving dimensions. The PSS is a 7-item scale with 5 items worded positively and 2 items worded negatively. The PSS is a 9-item scale with 6 items worded positively and 3 items worded negatively. The negatively worded items were recoded such that all scale responses are summed to create an overall PSE score, and the range for the PSE was 7 to 35 with a mean of 26 and an SD of 2.8. Discussion. The current project sought to expand knowledge of embodied cognition and provide resolution to the debate regarding the utility and validity of the power-posing effect. Specifically, we sought to investigate how expansive posture impacts one's confidence. Nej, stoppa inte. Låt det vara. Går över. One's confidence for problem solving, as well as the psychological attitudes of self-esteem and optimism. While previous research provides evidence for a positive relationship between posture and self-esteem and improved mood. Sorry, excuse me. Excuse me, I will continue. Current findings or lack thereof between power posing and psychological attitudes and problem solving, self-efficacy, provide additional evidence in the debate against the validity of power posing and its practical utility. A variety of points may provide context for these results. Several study characteristics may provide alternative explanations for current results. For instance, the popularity and widespread coverage of non-verbal expansiveness in both the media as well as in university classrooms and textbooks may result in a bit of overexposure to the research belying the purpose of the current experiment. This overexposure, coupled with the lack of a cover story for participants, may have an impact on subjects' posture and self-evaluations. The current study did not use a cover story, and instead participants were explicitly told that the purpose of the study was to investigate the relationship between non-verbal behavior and attitudes. Previous research indicates there may be a benefit from carefully framing the task for participants so that it does not moderate results. The current study did not ask subjects to engage in a filler task during the pose, which may have impacted the findings. Previous research suggests that instead of a direct or immediate effect on psychological states, bodily states instead provide context that the mind interprets as a possible action. And here you have to think about the cerebellum theory by David Bader and, of course, J. Gibson. For instance, expansive poses impacted participants' empowerment only when they were experienced in interpersonally relevant context, suggesting that embodiment is largely impacted by the context in which the pose is experienced. In this study, posing with no filler task may have done little to provide interpersonal context, which could limit the impact of posing on psychological states. However, some studies have found effects using tasks without social components, such as Fisher et al., who found expansive posture resulted in increasing feelings of power, and Yap et al., who found that expansive posture increased risk of negative behaviors like cheating. outside of individual study or sample effects, the lack of findings in the current study suggests there is much about embodied cognition for researchers to discover. Initial power analysis based on the effect sizes found in similar studies in the field reveal a sample size of 103 participants would be suitable, and the current sample was 123 participants. While this study had ample power to detect an effect, no effect was in fact present. A few possible explanations suggest that the present study may be missing a specific condition to induce the embodied cognition that has accompanied power posing in previous research. However, a more plausible explanation, and one that has been echoed by other researchers, is that we clearly have yet much to learn regarding specific conditions impacting embodied cognition The current study contributes to the power posing literature by confirming new directions in the field of study. Increasing research in recent years suggests that while widespread popularity continues in the media and pop culture, the impact of power posing on psychological attitudes and behavior is in fact very limited. Indeed, continued re-examination of the Carney, Cuddy and Yap study that sparked initial interest in power posing has resulted in Carney suggesting a moratorium on continued investigation. The present research study confirms this direction and provides evidence that expansive posturing does not have measurable effect on behavior. taking in consideration with the current findings, future implications should include the possibility that the conditions under which expansive and constrictive posture impacts psychological states is so limited as to be rendered impractical. This stands in direct contradiction to the widespread media message of power posing as a life hack or life-changing. This is not to say that embodied emotion and cognition as broader constructs are impractical. Quite the contrary, there is ample evidence of the existence of the power of embodiment to influence psychological states. The most Duckworth, Bar Garcia et al., Hall et al., Niedenthal, Stepper and Strack, Tom Peterson, Lau, Burton and Cook. Given the debate about the robustness of the power-posing effect, researchers clearly have a great deal yet to discover about embodied cognition and embodied empowerment. However, given the lack of replicability across a variety of contexts, the growing evidence of power posings is still something of a thing to be investigated into. And I will now go back to the lecture I had in 1310. We will look to some aspects of it. This is the one from Acta Psychologica by Sarah Awad, Thomas de Battin and Albert Ziegler. Embodiment, I said, I felt. And it does have some years to it, but one interesting thing is the illustration. And although not recommendable normally, I will actually in this case make a show of the illustrations. And I will also ask my fellow colleague Kalle Lundahl to help with some practical instructions, if that is all right. The first one will be just to look at the pictures, the photos from the investigation by Abad. And is there anything you notice? And I'm just going to explain. This is the bad posture, of course, and this is the good one. Take a gander at the good one. Do you see anything problematic there?
Yes, she's sitting on her toes, actually.
Yes, she does. So that has not been noticed. She does not even reach to the ground, and the whole investigation in that case actually comes to a moratorium. because she cannot be grounded if her feet doesn't reach the ground. This is very the same as the article by Sarah K. Nielsen. 2 minutes, and some of the postures are quite impractical and not very ordered. The first high power sitting is actually a collapse stance. I think you can see it as well. That's evidence A.
Yes, indeed.
So superficial superpower is something to be avoided. But of course, since this is a new subject, I think that trap is easy to fall into. This is the first time actually presented 2 negative articles, but they are very helpful. The last thing you will have to look at is the faces first, and I'm going to put that one over the faces. These are tennis players. Can you judge who's winning and who's losing?
Of these 6,
You can also say you cannot.
I would perhaps guess the first one, but I don't know if it's sorrow or happiness.
No, I would say you cannot say from the faces. But here you have the body accompanying the faces. Those are the actual bodies. We can take a gander on those. Could you tell from the bodies, it's from the same game, who won?
He won.
Yes. And when people are being asked, 99% says he. So the face doesn't seem to be enough. And of course this, I don't know if it's contradicting the famous Paul Ekman, the Swedish relation who investigated a lot into faces, which is indeed very interesting. But I have noticed during the years there's a bigger tendency to take in the whole body, because faces are simply just not enough. And oddly enough, when it comes to those extreme expressions of regret, disbelief, anger, and on the other side, absolute happiness, success and winning, the facial expressions are surprisingly similar. So we will try some our positions. It could be good for the viewer to have some demonstrations. I'm going to put you into the positions. So the first one is going to be a contracted, and as I show, this is literally contracted. It's putting the body together. You can sit down, and I'll first show you a picture and you can try to imitate it. Is the guy to the left.
Okay.
So you see here, you can see in the process of contracting, this contracting, we now, some years past since this article, will actually literally diminish the fMRI vision of thinking. It will make it smaller. This is literal. We know that. They did not know that at the time of the articles, though. And the other one I want you to try out is this one. And you have a table, and you can use the table to slump forward. And do note that she still has the legs in front of her. I think she is in a good standard, but she should have her feet under the chair. Could you put them under the chair? Yes. and then you tilt a bit more. So this is contracting on the length. Let's see if I can point here. Yes, I can. You see here how it's contracting all over, and it ends with the feet under the chair. And the feet under the chair is to compensate. When I was in Japan many years ago, I didn't see a single soul having his or her feet under the chair anywhere. I never saw it. I stayed there for 4 months. It is unhealthy and it will damage the back. Here, because all pressure comes here. We had some doctors looking at the videos we made before, and there is an increased risk of a hernia right here because of the strain that's put on the body. So you see, it's both bodily gain and mind gain. We know this. Let's try out the other poses. I don't think that's a healthy one, but let's do it anyway. It's still a power pose. You can actually sit in this way, but you will probably slump in the long run. But you see how the leg is more healthily put. It's not in the position like this, which puts an incredible strain on the back. So it's in a healthier position. And do note, oddly enough, people in higher positions in company suffered less than 30% of those in the lower when it comes to RSI, that is repetitive strain injury. And one of the reasons is this position is about 25 times more healthy than the other one. And usually they do not contain it for a longer time. And the second one of the power positions, which is that one. Yes. So you see, by spreading the legs, you give a bigger chance of having a contact with the sitting bones. Of course, both these fellows in the power positions don't have contact. But I'll bet, and this is a factor people don't know about, when they are not sitting in these positions, when they are standing, I'll bet they are in a balanced position. It is not evident in these photos, but they do diverge from a healthy position. So this is the factor that needs to be added. These are usually not healthy positions. Although the second guy is sitting fairly well. You can see he's not slumped here in the neck region. He is. She is actually not slumped. I think that's funny. They used a person who doesn't have a bad posture. So posture do have another aspect to it, and it's the verticality of the torso. And I think that added could be quite a good mixture. And in a couple of lectures, I hopefully can take up Cuddy's research, which is incredibly interesting. Thank you very much, Kalle, for your great help. And I say thank you, listeners, and have a very pleasant, afternoon. Bye-bye for now.